Hello, and welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to another monthly stand-up for the .NET MAUI Community Toolkit. My name is Brandon Minnick, and I'll be taking over hosting duties from Gerald today. He's not feeling well, and ironically, I'm just coming off of COVID, so I'm not feeling too great either, but feeling better than I was about 5 days ago, and so happy to be here with everybody. So I tell you what, we have a huge agenda today with a lot of great announcements, a lot of things to discuss. So let's jump right into it. And Kim, I'd love to start it off with you because we have a new announcement. We have a new version.
We do. We have a version 1.3. So that's been released, and there's a blog post over on the .NET blog that I put together, which is all of the good work of this team, covering off all of the various elements. So we can walk through those if you like. So the first one on these is status bar styling. So that's one that everyone's been looking forward to, and allows us to customize the status bar style and the colors there as well. So that's a fantastic one. It's really easy to implement as well. And next up, we've got the Gravatar image source. So that's a nice one, and George was very much involved in that as well. So George in the chat. So that's in there, and again, a nice, easy to implement feature. So in this blog post, we just sort of cover the high level, but we point to the docs wherever we can as well. And then we've got animations as well. So the first part of animations, which is the fade animations, but it's the groundwork for everything that's sort of going to come forward with the other animations as well, which I'm particularly looking forward to because I love a bit of animation. So yeah, and SourceLink, which should help people out with their debugging. So being able to step through into the source code of the MAUI Community Toolkit as you're working through your project. And there's heaps and heaps of other fixes in there as well. So there's a link out there to the release notes. So go and have a look at those. And we should I'll throw this link to this into the chat window if it's not there already. And there's also some notes on contributing as well. So, obviously all of this is powered by the community. So we really love and appreciate all of the community contributions. So keep that going. And the other thing as well is, we worked out how to get blog posts onto the .NET blog. So we should be able to do all our future announcements on here as well. So that's good news.
Love it. Yeah, thanks so much, Kim. Appreciate you pushing that through for us, getting all the work done, getting us set up on the .NET blog. But as we mentioned, today we are in October, and Pedro wanted to hand it over to you to talk about Hacktoberfest.
Hello, everyone. So this will be real quickly. It's just a heads up that our repo is part of the Hacktoberfest. So if you are to contribute and give a t-shirt or plant a tree, don't mind to go to our repo and found for help you wanted issues or bug issues. They are all open to external contributors. And please do not do typos PR. And I believe that's it that I can say about Hacktoberfest. Cannot wait for see all the great PRs from you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Pedro. Yeah, that's one big thing with Hacktoberfest this year is they are pushing the maintainers to actually mark PRs as invalid if it is something, we'll say low effort, like fixing just a simple typo so that you can get your PR approved and try and get a free t-shirt. They do want to encourage high quality PRs, but our community has been awesome. Folks like George here in the chat has been submitted nothing but amazing PRs. So I don't think we'll have too much of a concern there. But moving forward, we have a proposal from Vlad about Dialogs. Vlad, tell us about Dialogs.
Yeah. As for Dialog, we probably discussed it on the previous meeting where we had a discussion about it. So this proposal is coming from idea of, for example, application where we should allow user to save, allow to user choose the folder, for example, where the user want to save some files, or allow user to open some directory, like allow user to choose the directory where he can, for example, choose and traverse some files. These features will be very useful in desktop applications where you can, especially like Windows and macOS, where you can have access to the file manager. So, and as you know, with .NET 7, MAUI has a lot of improvements related to the desktop. So I think this Dialogs feature will be very useful and enhance .NET MAUI.
Yeah, I agree. So Vlad, is this just specific to desktop? Is that right?
Not exactly. We can extend it with all platforms like Android and iOS. So I can show how it may work in a macOS application. So where you can like choose like save image, for example, and it show you dialogue. The same dialogue will appear on your mobile application where you can just access to like file manager in operation system on iOS. And in Android, I haven't found like built-in good file dialog. So there I already investigated and need to create it my own. But anyway, this feature can be available for all platforms, not only for desktop.
That sounds fantastic. What are you thinking for next steps, Vlad? Is this something we want to vote on? Is this something we want to approve for the toolkit?
Yeah, it's just waiting for approves and champion this issue.
Okay, great. What other questions does anybody else have before we vote on whether or not to approve it?
My only one was going to be whether it's supported, whether it's going to be suitable for mobile. But I think because obviously there is the Files app, isn't there, on iOS? But I don't know if we can programmatically show bits based on that rather than having to write our own. But yeah,
actually on iOS it's the same code as for Mac Catalyst. I even first started implementing it for iOS, and it works pretty much the same. For example, there it has a document picker, so it's a built-in view controller which allow you to choose any file. So it will even work with files in iCloud or any other storage providers which you have in the system. So it's a built-in controller which you do not need. So we just provide an access and like a wrapper around it.
Can you zoom the code a little bit, please?
Let me try. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Way
and
better.
then,
yeah.
So what's it look like on Android then, Vlad? You said you had to create your own implementation there?
Yeah, on Android it's a bit different because I had created my own like file dialog, and I don't have screenshots for that, but for here it allowed me to choose. Well, why I decided to create it at all? First, I needed to use it for open, and actually in .NET MAUI we already have a file picker, but for some reason specifically on Android it didn't allow me to choose files. It only allowed it always asked me for images, even if I chose pick options default, which I assume should allow me to choose any file in the system. So that is why I created the file dialog, which actually has a bunch of code, and it just it's a sample dialog, other dialog, and where we display all files which we have in the system based on initial directory which we initialize. So we can, so this file dialog allow us choose not only like file, it can allow to choose folder, which is also useful, especially when you need to just select the folder not only file, for example, open directory, which you usually find like open folder, and the same for files. Also, it supports saving as well, so we can reuse it not only for like open file dialog, but also allow to select the specific folder for saving our file, which is currently not available in .NET MAUI.
I was wondering how it works with permissions. Is that because that feels like it might be tied in as well? I don't know. Like I know that whenever I use iOS, it's like, oh, you want to select this folder? It's like, well, you've got to. Can the app have access to look at what's here? Is that? I'm just wondering if that's if something that this hits, or if there's already some infrastructure pieces for it. I'm not sure.
Probably I didn't get your question, but do you ask about permissions?
Yeah, just whether there's going to have to be permissions. Developers who are using this will have to set up permissions and things like that.
Yeah, so usually permissions we have in, for example, in Android manifest. So you need to read and write external storage permissions. Also in dialog service, we also ask using standard permission request and ask for specific permission which we need. It depends on our action. For example, for save, we need a storage write, and we check if permissions is granted. Then we just show this file dialog, which will then allow us to. So then Android will give us back the list of files, the list of folders which we have in a system. So as for permissions, it's already done. We can just retrieve permissions based on .NET MAUI, like Xamarin Essentials previously.
Yep.
Is that something we want to do, or we just document that they should? The consumer of it should.
Yeah, as an idea, I would like to move the whole like dialog service with both like saving and asking permissions. Probably it will be better solution if we already ask user for that. Even because like we allow users the whole process, not only like a showing dialog, but probably also with this savings and like for let me open in iOS where we have a file picker. Yeah, like a file picker allow us not only like a pick file, but also read that file later. So idea here is probably the same, like we choose some folder and then we allow to save it somewhere.
Okay. I've actually conveniently I've been writing a chapter about permissions and how you interact with it, and frustratingly they're quite different, aren't they, between the platforms? Like if someone denies permission on Android, there's another way of checking whether you need to show them or not, because you can ask whether they've been asked before or not, which is the check async, isn't check status async.
Yeah, we always check status before we showing this dialog. So that is why user shouldn't get like error. Otherwise, we can show toast or any like beautiful message for user.
So we are managing that.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a question about the API, because like this looks like an Essentials API, something that will be fit well on Essentials. And for the status bar, I made all the code static, and I saw that you use interfaces and not make code static. So like does make sense to make this a static class and use static methods just like Essential does? Like why we are trying to using an interface here, and also to set up a pattern, because like we have more these APIs on our toolkit, so it will be good to have a pattern there.
Well, as for static, as you know, even in .NET MAUI, after migrating from Xamarin Essentials to .NET MAUI, they also has like interface like iPermissions, and they then have like static field, static property, which allow us to like access that interface, because it's like registered as singleton with some lifetime. So it's just so static properties, just probably a convenience way to access it. But if you like to test it or have a custom implementation, I would still suggest to have an interface, and probably we can just reuse the same style as .NET MAUI has.
But for a custom, like if with interfaces, if you want to do a custom implementation, you need to re-implement everything, because it's not like a abstract class that you can take advantage of the base methods and the basic calls. So, I mean, not sure if I like the argument of implement yourself, because if you want to implement yourself, it's the same thing that you will create your own from scratch, you know.
Yeah, interface is just in case you interface is useful in case you would like to test your application and mock it for unit test, for example, that will just return you true or false if you just need to skip that code with UI part. So with static, I think it's not possible.
Yeah, you just need to use a device runner to test that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that's exactly why I use the interfaces. Vlad is for unit testing, so I can just pass it whatever and mock it out in the unit tests. I mean, I think Essentials does both now, right? They have an interface and they have a static, so maybe we could follow that pattern, especially if we want this to be promoted one day into .NET MAUI, and that would make it easier for the .NET MAUI team to adopt it.
Yeah, also for those who prefer like registering set dependencies with constructor, they also will like using interfaces instead of static field.
Yeah, and actually even here, maybe dialog service takes in an I permission, and we can build on the existing dependency injection.
I permission doesn't have an interface. There is no I permission.
Never mind.
I fell into that trap.
Yeah, I have no questions. No more questions.
Shall we vote?
Sure. All right, we'll start with the ayes. Let's see, show of hands for everybody who would like to approve dialogues for the .NET MAUI Community Toolkit. Okay, it's unanimous. Well, congratulations, Vlad. We'll promote this to approved. We can actually do it right now. We'll do it live. Show everybody how it happens. All we do is that, and now it's approved. Cool. And Sean, I'd love it if you have the time to be involved with the PR reviews too, with your background and permissions and making sure that we don't mess anything up for anybody.
Yeah, happy to be.
All right, fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Vlad. Next up, we have bindable property generators. Pedro, take it away.
So I was porting the touch effect, and there is a tons and bindable properties, and I feel like that we should do this first to avoid me a lot of typing. And because of that, I would like to bring this, and we finally approve. I put there 3 APIs proposal for usage, And also I want just to propose one more thing. It's like we discussed that before, but not sure if I put that on the issue, that this first version of the source generators for bindable property will be just used by the community toolkit. So we will not make that public to outside the users, because we, from the past discussion, we would like to see how that feel, how we feel typing those attributes, and see if you can improve it here and there. And also because of the new features of the C# 11, where you can use generic zone attributes, so that can make our life easier also, on instead of specifying the type of the property, bindable property, you just use a generic there, and that will be implicit on the generator. So yeah, just a reminder that for outsiders that are watching this stream, when we merge this PR the first time, you will not be able to use unless you copy the project and paste on your own solution. But yeah. And as you can see, we have 4 proposals API, and I think that we first need to vote which one we would like to use. So I can explain them briefly if you want.
Sure. Or... yeah, is there a spot in here that maybe I can show all 4 at the same time, or?
You can go to one to the last, I believe. Not sure if that is
all the way down.
No, if in the not, proposal.
I could scroll through them one by one.
Okay, so in the proposal we have the. Okay, a little bit more.
There we go.
Yep, this one. That basically we will use attributes to specify how to generate the bindable property. And right now we have this first one that is at the class level. So I always put 2 samples. One is the first one, the card title will provide like all the fields that we can use to fill the bindable property. And the second one is the short version, like where we can implicitly what you want to generate. So we can do that at the class level, and using names and strings. So for example, we have that invalidate method that will be our own property change method for the card title. So we will just pass the name of that method, and the bindable the source generator will know which method will be the property change method. So as you can see there is an invalidate that is the name of the method. So when it generates the code, they will make sure that that method is called every time that the property change. And right below, you see the generated code that will always be basically the same on all of them. And then we have the second one that use at the constructor level. So it's the same as the previous one, but instead of using that at the class level, we do that in the constructor level. But the API, the public API will be the same. Then we have the third one, and that is like we have a bindable property generator at the top level. Then we know that we must generate a class for that, and we as a developer type the properties, like as you can see, the card title string property and the get and the setter, and we use that property to attach the bindable property generator, and you specify the property name and the type and anything like that. So the first one is like the full version, and the second one, as you can see, the simple version, I just use the bindable property attribute, and that will generate the defaults for me. So no need to do anything. And this card description property is the generated one. So while when you do the bindable property attribute, the class will be generated, then we can specify this card description property without problems. And we have the next one, the fourth one, that that we can use a field. So you use the bindable property field there. And with that field, we can, so instead of creating the property, we create the bindable property field and set the attribute there and specify what you need to specify. And with the, and there is another method that is initialize async. So for example, if you needed to add some gesture recognizer or do some customization in some control, you can use that method, and that method will be called in the static constructor of that class. So we will make sure that anything that you need to customize will be customizable right away. And I believe these are the 4 public APIs. So we need like to vote which one we would like to use.
Yeah, we can. I'll kick off a discussion. So I was I remember I was the one who proposed the 4th one. It's actually not my favorite, but the reason I proposed this 4th one is it aligns best with the MVVM community toolkit, where we use attributes like observable property on the fields, but with bindable properties, they have to be static. And what is kind of rough when putting bindable property on a static field, well, we now need to initialize that in the static constructor. And so we essentially have to hijack the static constructor, which means now you want to use the static constructor for your code, then you have to leverage a partial method, which will also generate for you, which is, you know, it's a little bit confusing. It adds a little bit of overhead. How many view models or I'm sorry, we're not view models. These would be views or controls. How many controls would use static constructors? I can't think of too many, but there is some overhead there. So I like the first one where we put it on the class level. I think this one is the least intrusive. It's still very easy to understand. And the other thing I like about this is we can still do the other ones if we start with this one. So for example, if you go through and add in the attributes on the class level as source generators, we could always come back in later if the demand is there to do them on the fields or on the constructor. So I don't see these necessarily blocking each other, but rather we could start with one and maybe we do that. Maybe we pick whatever one you think is the easiest. And then later on, if folks come back and say, hey, wait a minute, I want to use this like the MVVM toolkit and use it on fields, or hey, I think it'd make more sense if we did it on the property. We could add those in later, but I don't see these blocking any of the other ones. I think they could all be complementary together.
Yeah, I think that there is some sense of that. I mean, we probably don't want to offer developers any and every way to do things in the long run, but I think the nice thing about the approach that we're suggesting, because it's going to be internal to the toolkit, and the hope is that the majority of the work is in the generation rather than the detection of where the attributes exist. That's a blanket statement. I have no idea on source generation. Is that we could test it out and we could see. I don't know, Pedro, how do you think in terms of, would it be easy to move where the attributes exist in terms of detection?
Yeah, that would be easy to follow that. We just needed to change the syntax receiver that we will implement. And for example, instead of looking at the class, we will look at the constructor or the field level. But yeah, as I mentioned also before, like this will not be public yet. So the version 1.0 will be just for us, and we can break that as we need and as we like to make sure that we will provide a good public API. So for example, if you vote for the option 1 and you in the future say, oh, this is shit, I don't like this, we can't totally came back, and just us will be hurted by that because we needed to refactor our code to apply the change, but we can do mistakes now.
Yeah, as for me, I would probably prefer the option 2, just because I prefer that properties visible inside inside class, not like, even if it's attribute, as for me, I would prefer just for reading, so it can be inside the class, not like above it.
Good point.
So it's the only one reason that I choose option 2 instead of option 1.
Tim, any thoughts?
I think my initial thing was thinking about trying to align it to the MVVM toolkit. So that was sort of my initial thing, was sort of heading towards number 4, but I think probably number 1 is kind of where I like it best, and probably where I'd look, as opposed to the constructor. But that's just personal preference. So I think 1 is probably where I like it, and I like very much the idea of the old term dog fooding it ourselves and seeing how we use it and how we like it before making it public. I think it's a great idea.
There's only a slight further suggestion that I made further down in the comments, and I think it slightly aligns more with the MVVM toolkit, is the idea of rather than specifying the property changed method name in the property description, you can actually put an attribute on the method itself. Because I think that's like how you have the property changed. No, also I forget what the names are now when you can define what the property notifies in terms of the method name, or is it the other way around? The method gets notified by the property.
Oh yeah, I forgot that one. I believe that I didn't post on the proposals, or did I? But yeah, the what Sean mentioned, if I'm not wrong, is like if you have the property changed method, you can do the attribute on that method, and we will see, okay, this is the property changed for this, for example, discard title, and you put the attribute over the method, and that we can also implement. For example, if you choose 1, we can implement this one as well. So like devs can opt in, okay, if I have a method, I will put on the method because it will be easier to find later. But if I don't specify a property change, then I put the attribute over the class level or over the constructor level or whatever. And it's not hard to implement 2 ways to do that.
Sounds good.
Okay, well, I think probably the best way to do this is I say let's first do the vote to get it out of the way, just to approve it. So ignoring which option, we'll do another vote on the option in just a second, but in general, show of hands, do we want to implement a bindable property generator internally in the MVVM, or I'm sorry, in the .NET MAUI toolkit? Show of hands. Okay, so we
laughing
are
because
everyone
who implements bindable properties is like,
right. I love it. All of us in the comments are like, yeah, I always just copy paste them and then hope for the best. Okay, so let's go down the list. How about we do it like this? Everybody pick which one's your favorite, since kind of like we discussed, we can always add more. These don't necessarily block each other. So let's all vote for our number 1 favorite. And then whichever one out of that gets the most, 1, 2, 3, or 4, then we'll start there. How's that sound, Pedro? Since you're doing the work.
A plan.
All right, so let's start with, here, I'll bring up my screen again. So we'll start with option 1. Whose number 1 favorite is option 1? Show of hands. Okay, that's a hand for Kim, right? All right, so 3. Well, actually, if we're just going by math, number one wins. That was easy.
Sorry for that.
Sorry, Vlad. I assume you're
there was no chance for one because it's option 2.
Yeah, I do like what your thought process there, though, Vlad. That having it inside the class does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, but for the other hand, we have a like constructor which probably not used at all. So so probably that is the reason we use bindable property generator, just because we want to avoid additional code.
Right.
We still have a like empty constructor, so we should avoid it.
All right. Well, look at us proving everything. Let's let me refresh my browser so I can be signed in and move it through the process. So we'll jump into approved. We've got Pedro on there as the champion. All right, fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Pedro.
Just a small question about it. We probably discussed that we want to implement it after C#11.
Yep. I will try to do that as fast as possible. That way you can try to experiment, and when C#11 come out, we break everyone. And at least not break, but we can like obsolete the old attribute and generate a new one with the generic and see how that goes. Because to be sure, I don't know if that will be on C#11 actually, because time to time they drop some features and include the others. So it's I don't know what will be there. So yeah, we can do that before 11 and see how that goes.
So it's just not a blocker for us to implement it even right now without 11 feature. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, since it is internal, I mean, we could. Oh no, because then we'd have to update the pipeline, and yeah, never mind. I was gonna say we could bump up to C#11, up a PR for .NET 7 in the ball, but yeah, we'll wait for C#11 then once it's stable, because that's what, November probably, hopefully. All right, we've got another big one to chat about. This one is the Windows map handler, and this is brought to you by the .NET MAUI engineering team. So this is actually Rui. Rui's been longtime engineer from Xamarin and .NET MAUI. And long story short, there is a problem on Windows with WinUI. They haven't yet implemented a couple APIs that the team needs to properly implement maps. And so the team reached out to us and asked if we could add this to the community toolkit as a stopgap until the WinUI team kind of catches up. And so let's see. I'll be honest with you, gang. I'm not an expert on this because I am not a Windows dev, nor am I a web dev, and this is going to be based on WebView. So let's see. Does anybody here or who here is up to speed? I know Gerald's been working with the team. He was going to fill us in today, but obviously he wasn't feeling well, so we gave him the night off. But who here knows more than I do about about this proposal and how it'll work?
I saw a pull request and even start reviewing it. So as I see, it was like an open web page inside of WebView and just display that map inside it. Also, we can subscribe to some events based on like I think JavaScript code. We can just invoke it and make and display what we actually need. So that's all what I saw from that PR. So I think that's it for now. It will be like the same as you open it in browser, but it will be just in the web view. So that's it about it for now. Until WinUI will have a native control.
Got it. So we were chatting about this a little bit right before we went live, and a couple of concerns as maintainers is, obviously this is something we'll maintain until WinUI comes out, And so how this implementation is done definitely matters. And Vlad, I think you mentioned this would be done in a separate NuGet package, something like a communitytoolkit.maui.maps. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. It will be a preferable way, just because we do not want to add additional dependencies in our community toolkit package. So it depends on like maps package. So if it will be a separate package, will probably be deprecated in some period of time when UI implement native control, and it will be a part of the MAUI. So I think it will be better than just we remove that, add to our library and then just remove it. So if it will be a separate package, probably I saw the media element will be the same, separate package. So I think it will be better for us. So we should minimize our dependencies from like additional packages. It's, as for me, it will be preferable. So it depends only on like .NET MAUI without depending on like .NET MAUI maps.
Got it. Yeah, I agree. That sounds good because seeing Rui mention that it's bringing in the Bing Maps SDK, we wouldn't want to add a dependency for everybody using the community toolkit on the Bing Maps SDK just because of this one workaround for WinUI. So, okay, great. What other, I guess the only other concern or question I have is around our CI/CD process. Right now we have our CI/CD pipeline builds every library, creates the NuGet packages for both for MAUI, community-toolkit.maui, community-toolkit.maui.core. I assume we would add this in as a step and build that as a third NuGet package. But I guess the question I have would be, would we then only release this if there was updates to this library? And I also recognize this is another question for Gerald, since Gerald is actually the one that publishes our NuGet packages. So does anybody know how that release process works, if Gerald would be able to kind of separate this out from our releases, or if that happens automatically? Would we push out, say, version 1.4 of Community Toolkit, and then there'd automatically be a new Community Toolkit.maps you get pushed out, even though there wasn't any changes?
I think it's a manual process anyway, because probably we need to sign packages as well. As far as I know, it's an internal script which just like grab our artifacts from Azure DevOps and then like probably unpack, then sign and push it to Nugget.
Okay.
I don't know if we. I think it's possible. It should be possible to specify what should be actually published.
Okay, that's good. The reason I bring this up is this was a problem on the Xamarin Community Toolkit, where every time we push out a new version of Xamarin Community Toolkit, there was a new version pushed out of Xamarin Community Toolkit Markup, even though there weren't any changes in Markup. So wanted to make sure we don't run into that same problem again here with the Maps SDK.
Do we
There's
need
there's an unpleasant possible option, and that's a separate repository for it. I'm not saying it's a good option, but it does mean that you've got all the changes in one place.
Ooh, that's
that
you're right. That would be certainly unpleasant, but definitely the cleanest way of doing it. Gosh,
we will need to promote it again.
and then yeah, we could always archive that repo later. Why don't we do this? I'm comfortable moving this forward for an approval vote, because I think we kind of have to for the community, doing it for the greater good. But let's leave that open to Gerald. Let's circle up with Gerald when he comes back and ask him about the CI/CD process to see what would be easiest for him, since he's the one that has to do it and does do it. And we can make that decision there. But it sounds like well, actually, let's. I was about to say it sounds like we're all cool with this, but I tell you what, let's move to a vote. So, for a show of hands, who votes to approve this proposal?
I mean, I've looked at the PR. There really isn't much to it. It's just like you say, it's the burden, isn't it? So if we can get some kind of guarantees on.
Yeah. Okay, great. So let's do this. You know, especially since Gerald's not here, it's really easy to just assign this to him. Thanks, Gerald. You're our champion. And yeah, we'll move this to approved. And I've also, let me jump back to the PRs because Rui actually did open the PR like we mentioned.
I've got it open if you want me to.
Oh yeah, go ahead and reopen that for me, please, Sean. And we'll get that process going again. And yeah, Gerald, if you're watching, we got some questions for you. A one-time thing to create the new repo, create the CI/CD pipeline, is that easier than building it here and then kind of destructing it later when we mark this as obsolete? Unsure, but we've only got about 10 minutes left and we still have a bunch of topics to talk about. So let's keep pushing forward and move on to this iOS version bug. Vlad, I think this one's yours.
Yeah, so this one came from, so I found that we have some features which are not supported in iOS 10, and like you see source generator generate some warning that they expect version 10, but we have a minimum version 14.2. I think that came from our template, .NET MAUI template, where they have that version. So we just reused it in our supported target framework. So that is why it generates warning. So as you know, .NET MAUI support version 10 and higher. And I found that in .NET 7, it changes to iOS 11. Yeah, at least what they have right now in their main repo. So the question here, what should we do? So as far as I remember, we should support the same versions which .NET MAUI support. So we just need to minimize this version to 11 or 10. But then we will have a lot of warnings because we had some APIs which were not implemented. So we will need to add like, is version at least 11, is version at least 10. So user will not be able to use all features from the community toolkit.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. I'll say I'm a little embarrassed because, yeah, when we created the toolkit, we literally talked about we need to support everything that .NET MAUI supports, and I didn't realize that we weren't. But I will say I've also seen those warnings, and I always just kind of ignored them. Kind of going back to the preview days, I was like, well, you know, that's just a preview problem. That'll go away on its own.
Yeah, warning not there.
So, yeah, I agree. I think this is something we should fix. And also, seeing that this is a warning, maybe we could promote that warning to change that from warning to severe, so it is an error instead. And then, yeah, it looks like I'm not sure if you're volunteering for the PR or not, but for whoever does the PR, like you mentioned, Vlad, we'll have to go through and, gosh, we'd want to at least mark things as unsupported. If ideally we'd add the support for the older APIs in iOS 10. I'm not sure what that scope of work would look like, but I think at least for this first PR, we'd mark them as unsupported because they do exist right now. And maybe we can do a big cleanup in a little bit, but goodness, yeah, this is a good catch.
Yeah, as for this one, I would suggest to release it together with .NET 7, where, as I mentioned, there will be like iOS version 11 is a minimum version, as I understand. So probably we will need less work for that. So I already started migrating to .NET 7, found a lot of errors and our pipeline failed, so just skip it for now. Yeah, but probably it's better to implement it together as just because it's a breaking change. So with .NET 7, we probably allow for us to make some breaking changes here.
Agreed. I tell you what, Vlad, we only have a couple minutes left. Can you add those thoughts as a comment to this bug so we don't forget about it? And just real quick, does anybody have any concerns?
Yep. Like, not sure how that warning actually works, but if the only way to get rid of them is not using a pragma, or there is like something that don't know attributes or something like that, because for example, the status bar thing that we discussed, that we are using obsolete API, because now on Android API 30 they changed how we can how we can manage the status bar, but we still need to maintain old code in the new code. So we always see this warning there, because we need to do, if the version is this, do that. If the version is other, do other thing at the runtime. So put this as a error will like break, even if you fix that still break, because the analyzer will see the code there and will complain, but not sure if there is attribute that would just get rid of that analyzer, like the required keyword this on the constructor.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, I also saw a warning that we use versions which is not supported anymore. Like this feature is not supported in iOS 15, but we still use it. It's in post, so but anyway, it works for now. Probably just because it's just deprecated and not removed, and so we also probably need, as part of this issue, we probably also need to fix that as well.
Agreed. Good point. Yeah, I wonder if there's something. Oh goodness. Yeah, I would hate to have to do if defs and have like special methods just for or special branches on methods just for certain versions. Because yeah, using the operating system API where you say is supported version 11 is very easy. But yeah, Pedro, you're right. The compiler doesn't know any better, and it would still give us those. So okay. All good things to think about. 2 more minutes. We might go a little bit over. The next one, this is one I wanted to bring up today because we have a pull request open for state layout, which is one that we've gotten tons of requests for. So very, very excited to see Nick J stepping up and implementing this for us. And I was actually digging through this last night and had a little proposal down here because when I was going through the code, the class state layout is not actually a layout in the classical sense. Like, for example, like a grid implements iLayout and a vertical stack layout implements iLayout. If we look at the code for state layout, it doesn't implement anything. It's implemented as a bindable property. So this is like a bindable object that we bolt on and allows us to change the state. So one thing I wanted to bring up, because my concern is if we call it something layout, I know like developers like me, I would try and say like, oh, okay, cool, new state layout, children.add, or implementing it like I would a stack layout or a grid. So want to throw out this proposal. What if we change the name to be something like bindable state or bindable state layout? Just so that it doesn't necessarily imply that it's used like a layout, when in fact it's this bindable object, bindable class.
I like the idea. I believe that we can use view or content at the end, because we will wrap a lot of views inside that layout, that state actually, and we will switch between them. Actually, it's templates, right? I can't remember right now if that is just templates or view.
So there's a class called state view, which inherits from content view, and content view has the content property, but state view adds in another property called I think custom state or something like that. That is a data template. Might be easier if I just.
If we call it like state container.
I like that.
State container, yeah. So let's see. We do this on the fly real quick. So there's state layout dot shared. So let's view this as unified since it's state layout. Okay, so jumping back to here. So yeah, so it's actually public static class state layout. So these are all bindable properties or attached properties, which is basically, this is the confusion I wanted to avoid, calling it something layout, because we have a uniform items layout, which is implementing iLayout. It's a real layout. And then inside of state layouts, you would add in state views. And so we have our state view, and this is what implements content view and then adds in a template here as a data template. So there's state views added inside of this bindable object state layout. And yeah, the question is, what should we call it? Because yeah, just want to avoid that.
I think container works well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, state container. I like that.
What do we need state view? Can we put any view inside it, like just a state layer, or is just how we store information, so we cannot put like any view inside container based on state?
So the way
why
it's
do
designed,
we need additional view?
Yeah, that's a good question. The way it's designed now, state layout has a list of state views. So actually seeing this, I'm kind of with you guys now more and more on state container, because it contains the list of state views. Yeah, there's some custom logic in the state layout controller that looks at the state views and needs some of the properties inside, which is why it's implemented like that. So it looks like your custom view would go inside of the state view.
State view is a wrapper for the content that you're supplying, then, is it?
I just thought about probably different design about it, so it can be like a container, like state container, which contains a list of views, any view, and for view we can have a attached property, which can be like state key, and depends on that key we can just show or display it without like simplify addition, just remove additional code. Like state view is not necessary anymore. State key, probably state layout key. I don't remember. Also need like loading or loading save, which we currently have in enum for that, just to probably simplify it a bit.
I tell you what, we don't have a ton of time. We're actually out of time. Okay, let's move forward with changing the name, and then let's keep chatting about that Vlad, in the PR. And I'll say with that, we did have a couple more items on the agenda, but we'll roll those over. I think we had one more vote to do. Actually, let's do that one real quick, because this one is for MAUI markup extensions and should be pretty easy, because it's literally these two methods right here. So adding in 2 more extension methods to the C# markup library to make it easy to use these app theme bindings. This is an awesome proposal open for us here by Federico. Thank you, Federico. And it would look like this. So if you wanted to use app theme bindings on, say, your button, specifically your button text color property, you would just say new button.appThemeBinding, and then all you would do is pass in your light theme color and your dark theme color. To me, this one looks pretty good, but Sean, what have I missed? You're the champion on this one.
No, you summarized it pretty well. We don't have the ability to achieve what we do in XAML that we do in the markup, which would be nice to achieve. So I think it makes sense.
Agreed. All right. One more quick vote, and then we'll sign off for the day. Show of hands, who here approves the app theme binding markup extension? All right. Woo! Big day. Thank you, everybody, so much. I'll move this one over to approved. I know I have to run. I've got to go straight to the airport to catch a flight. I'll be wearing lots of masks, because I did have COVID last week, but CDC says I'm no longer contagious, so I'm free to fly again. But thanks, everybody, so much for joining us. If you have any questions, if you have any discussions you'd like to chat about, please join us on the .NET MAUI Community Toolkit repo. Open up a discussion. If you find bugs like this bug on iOS, let us know. We don't do them on purpose, we promise. Thank you so much, everybody, and we will see you next month.
Yeah, don't remember it's Hacktoberfest, so don't forget to put your PRs. We are waiting for you.
Give us those good PRs. Happy Hacktoberfest, everybody.
Yeah, goodbye.
Bye all.